There are luxury cars, and then there is the 1965 Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow. This was not a car that relied on spectacle. It did not need outrageous styling, thunderous performance, or flashy gimmicks to make an impression. It arrived with something much rarer and much more powerful: quiet authority. It carried itself with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing it has nothing to prove. At first glance, the Silver Shadow looked like a natural continuation of the Rolls-Royce tradition. Elegant, formal, beautifully proportioned, and unmistakably aristocratic. It seemed to be just another finely judged expression of old-world British luxury. But beneath that calm and polished exterior, something far more significant was taking place. This was not simply a new model replacing an old one. This was the moment Rolls-Royce made one of the boldest decisions in its history. It turned away from the old coach-built world that had defined the marque for decades and embraced modern engineering, modern construction, and a new idea of what a luxury motor car should be. And perhaps the most remarkable thing of all is that it managed to do this without losing its identity. The Silver Shadow did not become louder, harsher, or more ostentatious in order to modernize. It redefined luxury not by adding noise, but by removing effort. It made comfort feel more natural, engineering feel more invisible, and the act of traveling feel more refined than ever before. To understand why the Silver Shadow mattered so much, you have to look at what came before it. The Silver Cloud was a magnificent car and remains one of the most elegant Rolls-Royces ever made. It represented the last truly great flourish of the traditional coach-built age. It was stately, graceful, and deeply rooted in an earlier idea of motoring, one in which craftsmanship and presence mattered above almost everything else. But by the mid-1960s, the world had moved on. Customers still wanted serenity, craftsmanship, and dignity, of course. But they also wanted better use of space, more modern engineering, improved road manners, and a car that felt contemporary rather than simply traditional. The old separate chassis formula, admirable though it had been, was becoming increasingly difficult to justify in a fast-changing market. The Silver Shadow was Rolls-Royce's answer to that challenge. It was not merely the replacement for the Silver Cloud, it was the dividing line between two eras. On one side stood the old world of handcrafted formality and mechanical conservatism. On the other stood a more modern, more sophisticated, and more technically ambitious future. The Silver Shadow was the point at which Rolls-Royce crossed that line. What makes the story even more impressive is how early the company recognized the need for change. Rolls-Royce engineers were already thinking about the Silver Cloud successor as early as 1954, before the Cloud itself had properly established its place in the market. They understood that future buyers would want a car that was more compact on the outside, but no less spacious or comfortable on the inside. That may sound obvious now, but at the time it represented a major philosophical shift. Rolls-Royce had built its reputation on separate chassis construction and traditional coach building. Those methods had served the company brilliantly, but they were no longer the best way to achieve the packaging efficiency and structural sophistication that modern buyers increasingly expected. So Rolls-Royce came to a conclusion that would have seemed almost radical by its own standards. If it wanted to move forward, it had to abandon the construction method that had defined the marque for generations and adopt monocoque construction instead. That decision alone makes the Silver Shadow one of the most important cars in Rolls-Royce history, because it was not just a styling exercise or a mild technical update. It was a complete rethink of the marque's engineering philosophy. Development of the new car gathered pace in the late 1950s under the factory code name SY. Different wheelbases were tested, and the company soon realized that the shorter proposal was the smarter solution. That decision tells you a great deal about the thinking behind the Silver Shadow. Rolls-Royce was no longer trying simply to build the grandest car it could. It was trying to build the most intelligent one. The man tasked with shaping that intelligence into a physical form was John Blatchley, one of the most important figures in Rolls-Royce design history. His assignment was extraordinarily difficult. He had to create a car that looked completely modern in 1965, but which would also remain relevant and saleable for years to come. That mattered because the investment required for monocoque construction was enormous. and the new design had to justify itself over a long production life. Blatchley's solution was a masterclass in restrained modernism. The Silver Shadow did not overwhelm the eye with flamboyance. In fact, part of its brilliance lies in how understated it is. It is lower, tidier, and more integrated than the Silver Cloud, yet still undeniably a Rolls-Royce. The upright grille remains. The proportions retain their dignity. The car still projects immense presence, but the detailing tells a different story. The body sides are cleaner and flatter. The wings are less separate and sculptural. The whole car feels more unified, more coherent, and more rational. There is less of the old carriage-like sense of a body placed atop a chassis. Instead, the Silver Shadow looks like one complete object, designed as a single resolved piece of engineering. For Rolls-Royce, that was a profound step forward, and the structural changes were not merely theoretical. They delivered real-world benefits that buyers could feel. The new steel and aluminum monocoque body allowed the Silver Shadow to be shorter, lower, and narrower than the car it replaced, while also improving passenger space. That is one of the cleverest things about it. This was not downsizing as compromise. It was sophistication through efficiency. Despite its more compact exterior dimensions, the Silver Shadow offered more cabin room, a larger fuel tank, and greater luggage capacity than the Silver Cloud. That tells you exactly what Rolls-Royce was aiming for. It was not building a smaller luxury car. It was building a better packaged one. It was taking away wasted bulk while preserving, and in some cases improving, the aspects of luxury that genuinely mattered. Beneath the surface, the Silver Shadow was every bit as advanced as its new body structure suggested. Rolls-Royce described it at launch as the most technically advanced motor car in the world. And when you study the specification, that no longer sounds like inflated marketing. It had isolated subframes mounted with special rubber shock mountings to reduce noise and vibration. It featured four-wheel disc brakes, a major step forward for the marque. It used hydraulically operated self-leveling rear suspension, and it included electrically operated features such as the gear selector and front seat adjustment. This was not a traditional luxury car pretending to be modern. It was a genuine rethinking of the luxury saloon, engineered from first principles to deliver smoothness, silence, and refinement at an even higher level than before. It was advanced in the way truly great engineering often is, not flashy, not boastful, but so thoroughly resolved that the complexity disappears behind the experience. That is an important part of the Silver Shadow's appeal, because it is easy to overlook just how radical it was. When people think of a 1965 Rolls-Royce, they often imagine conservative old-money luxury, polished walnut, soft leather, and discreet prestige. And certainly the Silver Shadow offered all of that. But beneath those familiar ingredients was a surprisingly progressive motor car. Rolls-Royce had abandoned separate chassis construction in one clean stroke and paired its new body architecture with hydropneumatic braking and suspension technology licensed from Citroën. That system contributed enormously to the car's famously level, composed, and almost eerily smooth ride. This is where the Silver Shadow becomes especially interesting. It did not look radical, so many people never realized how technically bold it really was. It wore its innovation with such composure that it almost hid it. And yet, in a rather clever move, Rolls-Royce kept part of the old world intact. The Silver Shadow retained the proven 6.2-liter V8 engine and automatic transmission from the Silver Cloud 3, even though almost everything around them was new. That was a shrewd decision. The company was introducing radical construction, radical packaging, and radical chassis thinking, but it anchored all of that with a powertrain it already understood and trusted. In period terms, the engine was not there to impress anyone with headline performance figures. That was never the point. Its job was to move a large, expensive, and exceptionally refined saloon with supreme smoothness and minimum fuss. With roughly 200 brake horsepower and a top speed somewhere around 115 mph, the Silver Shadow was not slow, but neither was it trying to be dramatic. It was built around effortless authority, not theater. That phrase really gets to the heart of the Silver Shadow. This is a car founded on the idea that the finest engineering is the engineering you barely notice. You do not get into a Silver Shadow expecting mechanical drama. You expect calmness, tactility, and an atmosphere in which every control has been weighted, softened, and judged to flatter the occupants. Even the way it gains speed feels muted, as though the car has made the decision on your behalf that now would be an appropriate moment to move a little more swiftly. Lesser luxury cars try to impress by showing you how much equipment they contain. A truly great luxury car impresses by removing effort, noise, vibration, uncertainty, and fatigue. That is what the Silver Shadow understood so brilliantly. It did not fetishize luxury. It made luxury feel normal. Inside, the Silver Shadow struck a uniquely British balance between ceremony and usability. The seating position is high and commanding. The seats themselves feel more like armchairs than conventional saloon chairs. There is leather, timber, polished brightwork, and deep carpeting, exactly as you would expect. But what makes the cabin special is not simply the presence of expensive materials. It is the way those materials are arranged in service of ease. This is not one of those glamorous 1960s prestige cars that looks magnificent in photographs but feels awkward and compromised in reality. The Silver Shadow was meant to function properly in regular service. It was meant to work in the city, on the motorway, in traffic, at speed, and over long distances. It was a car for being driven in, and for arriving in without stress. That sense of effortlessness is perhaps best captured by one of the finest period observations ever made about the car. Motoring journalist and Le Mans winner Paul Frère once drove a Silver Shadow from Brussels to Monaco in a single day and remarked that he arrived fresh, relaxed, and not in the least tired. That may be the most concise and revealing description of what Rolls-Royce had achieved. The Silver Shadow was not trying to be sporting in the way a German executive saloon might be sporting, nor was it trying to be excessive in the way a large American luxury car might be excessive. Instead, it pursued something more subtle and arguably more difficult. It sought mechanical serenity over distance. It aimed to remove the strain from travel itself. That is the sort of luxury that often gets overlooked today. We tend to think of luxury as a combination of cost, status, and visible indulgence. But the Silver Shadow reminds us that true luxury is often less obvious than that. It is the ability to travel a great distance and arrive completely unfrazzled. It is the feeling that the machine has absorbed the stress of the journey so that you do not have to. The timing of the Silver Shadow was also crucial. By the mid-1960s, Rolls-Royce was under increasing pressure from rivals in Germany and the United States. The luxury car market was becoming more competitive, and the old assumptions that had long protected the marque were no longer enough. The Silver Cloud, lovely though it was, increasingly risked looking like a relic of another age. The genius of the Silver Shadow is that it responded to those pressures without becoming vulgar or imitative. It did not try to out-American the Americans with softness and excess. It did not try to out-German the Germans with a kind of severe technical obsession. Instead, it remained thoroughly British. But it became a more intelligent, more self-aware, and more modern British luxury car than anything the company had built before. That is why the Silver Shadow makes such a strong case for itself as the high point of post-war British luxury motoring. It modernized at precisely the right moment. And it did so without discarding the manners, restraint, and cultural confidence that made Rolls-Royce special in the first place. The Bentley T-Series reinforces that point. Mechanically and structurally, the T-Series and the Silver Shadow were fundamentally the same car. Strip away the different grille and badges, and you are left with the same engineering philosophy. That tells you something important. Rolls-Royce had so much faith in the new platform that it no longer needed two completely different cars to represent its two great names. The concept was sound enough, sophisticated enough, and complete enough to support both. And the numbers underline how effective that concept was. The Silver Shadow's new design was lower, shorter, and narrower than what had come before. Yet it delivered better accommodation and more sensible proportions for modern roads. That was not merely an aesthetic improvement. It was a philosophical one. The old Rolls-Royce formula had grandeur, but it also had excess bulk. The new formula preserved the grandeur while removing the unnecessary mass. Of course, the Silver Shadow was not perfect. Part of what makes it fascinating today is that its sophistication came at a cost. The hydraulic systems are complex and expensive to repair. Rust can attack the body, especially in the lower structural areas. Early gearboxes can be costly to rebuild, and neglected cars can become financial sinkholes very quickly. Aging electrics, air conditioning faults, and hydraulic problems mean that a cheap Silver Shadow can turn into a very expensive mistake. That reality has created one of the enduring myths around the car, that it is an inexpensive way into Rolls-Royce ownership. In truth, it is only a bargain if bought correctly and maintained properly. A good one can deliver a motoring experience, unlike almost anything else for the money. A bad one can remind you very harshly just how complex and advanced this car really was. And yet, for all that, the Silver Shadow still offers something deeply special. It turns movement into occasion without becoming theatrical. It does not need to shout about status because every detail quietly communicates it. The way the doors close, the view down the bonnet, the hush at speed, the glow of lacquered veneer in soft light. All of it creates the sense that traveling well still matters. That, perhaps, is what Britain once did especially well. Not merely building expensive cars, but building cars that understood the emotional and social texture of luxury. Cars that knew the difference between richness and vulgarity. Cars that understood understatement, atmosphere, and timing. The Silver Shadow may be one of the finest examples of that tradition. Because it combined those instincts with modern engineering sophistication, it also became a commercial success on a scale that might once have seemed almost un-Rolls-Royce-like. It went on to become the best-selling Rolls-Royce in the company's history, with tens of thousands built across the Shadow, Corniche, and related derivatives. That success matters because it proves the Silver Shadow was not merely admired in theory. Buyers understood it. They saw its value. They recognized that Rolls-Royce had not abandoned its identity but renewed it. So was the 1965 Silver Shadow truly the high point of British luxury cars? That will always remain a matter of opinion. Britain has produced plenty of extraordinary machines. But the argument in favor of the Silver Shadow is unusually persuasive. It had the grace and craftsmanship of traditional British luxury, the engineering sophistication of a modern age, and a design modern enough to last, yet restrained enough never to feel fashionable. Most importantly, it understood what a luxury car is really for. A luxury car is not simply something to be seen in. It is something that changes how a journey feels. It should leave you calmer, fresher, and more composed than when you began. On that front, the Silver Shadow was not merely successful. It was exceptional, and that is why it still resonates today. In an age obsessed with louder, larger, and more attention-seeking definitions of prestige, the old Silver Shadow offers a different view. It suggests that true luxury lies in calmness, competence, and the ability to make complexity disappear behind the experience. It reminds us that refinement is not weakness, understatement is not timidity, and the most sophisticated object in the room is often the one making the least fuss about itself. If you wanted to sum up the 1965 Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow in one line, perhaps it would be this. It was the moment Rolls-Royce stopped building the last great luxury cars of the old world and started building the first great luxury cars of the modern one. What do you think defines the pinnacle of British automotive luxury? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this deep dive into